Hi, this is Ren,
This is Casey.
and this is All Walks of Film.
Apes strung together! Oh my god! Oh my god! Oh my god! Oh my god! Oh my god. This movie, though, you're gonna be wrecked. Like, clear out the rest of your year. You can't have anything happen to you because you're just gonna be in tears for forever. Oh my god.
Yeah, so we just got out of watching War for the Planet of the Apes, and I was absolutely stunned, speechless. This movie is practically perfect.
Yeah. Since this is our first response, we're gonna get into some spoilers because this is a movie where, like, you can't talk about anything. You literally can't talk about anything and not spoil it. Don't watch the trailers. Try to avoid all the advertisement as much as you possibly can because a lot of it spoils too many really important things in the movie. It's stupid.
Yeah, so if you don't want to get spoiled, and I would suggest you not getting spoiled, wait until after you've seen the movie to listen to this.
Yeah, and if you just want, like, oh, is it a thumbs up or a thumbs down? I'm gonna say this is probably gonna end up being the best movie this year.
Yeah, it even trumps Logan, and even with the feels and all that kind of stuff, like, just miles above Logan, and Logan was absolutely fantastic.
Mm-hmm. I would say, like, the past 2 years, my top movie was Moonlight. My movie the year before that was Fury Road. This year it's gonna be War.
Yeah, I would be absolutely shocked if anything tops this for me. Now, granted, there are going to be some films that come out in the winter time that are going to be Oscar contenders and all that kind of stuff, and, you know, they're probably going to be some good films. I think Dunkirk will be fine, but
I don't have high hopes for Dunkirk. I think War very, 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 just by a gnat's wing, outpaces Silence, which I think is probably one of the best movies that's come out this year.
Wide release this year, yeah. I always hate those January releases because it's
you
like...
never know what year it is, but I'm counting Silence as this year.
Yeah.
But not only that makes the Caesar trilogy at least one of the best trilogies made on film.
I actually think this is better than the Star Wars trilogy, and that's really giving it high praise, because the Star Wars trilogy, it hits its high peak on The Empire Strikes Back, and Return of the Jedi just doesn't live up to Empire Strikes Back level of quality. Mm-hmm. It's very good, but not that good. Yes, the stuff with Vader's redemption and everything like that is fantastic, but, you know, some stuff in the middle is kind of...
Well, not only that, but this movie took the best strengths of the first film and the best strengths of the second film, worked them together, and then far outpaced both of those movies.
I was hoping that this movie was going to be better, but usually in films, you go from the first film, sometimes the first film's the best, sometimes the second film's the best, but very rarely is the third film the best film in the series, except for Toy Story. And
I don't agree with that one.
Oh, you like the first one better?
I think the first one's a better movie.
Oh, okay.
The third one is excellent, but I think the first one's better. But the other thing about this movie, too, is that part of the reason why I think this is going to be one of the best movies is that it's one of those movies that pushes the film media, like the film artistic style, forward in a very strong new direction. It has artistic integrity. It has merits as an allegorical film. It's kind of also like a really timeless film because that's one of the themes in the movie that we'll get into later when there's spoilers. But also, I mean, technologically, it looks beautiful and all of that stuff, but then it also hits the emotional highs and lows and has amazing character development, and that's usually kind of what ends up making my number one film of the year most years. It's just something that's really different from something I've seen before in terms of, like, film as a medium.
Yeah, as far as blockbuster movies that have exceeded my expectations, at least for me, this is the highest expectation exceeded ever. For me, I know I will probably argue with people, but this exceeded my expectations higher than The Dark Knight, and it exceeded my expectations equal to Mad Max Fury Road.
And with The Dark Knight, one of the reasons why I would agree with that is because one of the issues with The Dark Knight, as really good as it is that the way that it talks about philosophical issues is very dry and academic, and it's these weird conversations that, unless people sit down and have a podcast about it, sort of a thing, people don't really talk to each other that way.
Yeah, also, there is an element of Chris Nolan not really having a heart in his films. His films are emotionally cold, which is why Interstellar's love plotline is so stupid, because it doesn't work when you're a director that's that cold.
Right, exactly. But with War, it was doing something very similar, but in a way that actually made a lot more sense and felt more natural, worked with the characters, and was also really aided by the visual style of film. There was some expositional stuff, but most of it was, visual aids, visual cues, a lot of very simplistic dialogue between characters in a natural setting about very big, complicated philosophical issues.
If I'm going to talk about any weakness of this film, it's literally the opening credits thing getting people who hadn't seen the first two up to date.
Yeah, and mine is the beginning and the end, but that's going to be getting into spoilers. So, at this point, if you haven't seen the movie, please don't listen. Don't spoil this.
We warned you, and now we're warning you again.
Yeah.
Please don't, and don't spoil it for other people too.
Don't be a spoil monster.
Yeah.
Yeah. Alright, so moving on. Yeah, the opening crawl was not very good. It wasn't very compelling. It was kind of studio executives being worried that audiences are too dumb to get it, and also them having to apologize for the fact that they did the Rise before the Dawn thing. But then part of the reason why I say the beginning and the end is because Rise and Dawn both begin and end with very striking imagery that says something really significant about the plot. The first movie, you have the ape in the box with the eyes, and then it ends with Caesar in the tree looking out, with his new civilization that's about to, occur, but he's looking out over the humans, and, there's a lot of foreshadowing. But those are very striking images. And then in Dawn, it did it even better with the close-up of the face both times. But the close-up of the face at the beginning was with the war paint. But it's kind of interesting because that's more foreshadowing for what happens in the rest of the film, because the war hasn't actually started yet. And then at the end, it's on his face with all the apes surrounding him, putting their faith behind him as a leader. And it's this whole thing of he has to tap into his humanity to go into this next stage of what the war is really going to be like. And then in this one, it was an opening title scroll and some very fuzzy imagery of a jungle. And then the ending visual of the entire franchise was just sky with clouds. Which is it's heaven, but it's also oh, the Icarus, but you don't see anything, so it's just weak sauce. Even though the ending was really good, the end shot was not very good.
I think the end shot was trying to parallel the first movie.
Mm-hmm. It was.
Rise. So I think in that way, bookending the trilogy, it kind of works because it starts with, that wide shot with the sky and everything like that. So while I like the opening and ending shots of the other films better, I mean, that so much of the other stuff just worked for me that I'm willing to forgive that.
If that's literally the only bad thing about the movie, then that speaks to how excellent the movie is. I was just kind of especially when you get so worked up and emotional throughout the whole movie, and then it's just this
All right, so now we're gonna get into the positives, because holy shit,
that's the entire rest of the movie.
Yeah. So one of the things that I was blown away by this movie was that this movie doesn't really glorify war at all. And this is one of the first blockbuster movies that I've ever seen to do that. Even movies that call themselves anti-war movies glorify war. This movie makes every single death count, every single death devastating, and on both sides.
Yep.
This movie doesn't give you the satisfaction of picking sides. It's the tragedy of two sides fighting against each other.
And it's really interesting, too, because this is the most stereotypically evil villain from the entire franchise, because Colonel McCullough is, I mean, they hint at it visually very hard. He's Hitler. He's supposed to be a representative of the worst military leaders that the history has had to offer. You know, sort of this conglomeration. And even still, they make sure that he has humanity. There's some understanding as to what his motivation is. And it's still this sort of thing of like, it's still not man bad, ape good.
Right, and his death doesn't give you the satisfaction that you would expect from this type of film. Like, the movie sets up this revenge plot at the very beginning of the movie where you think, oh, Caesar's going to go into the camp and then he's going to get his revenge. We've seen this plot line so many times, and then this movie goes, yeah, we're going to lead you to that conclusion. And then what happens? He loses his voice, and then he becomes just a dumb animal. Something that he was terrified of humanity becoming. He meets his own fate that way, and Caesar can't put him down. I thought that was really powerful.
It was that, but then it was also the fact that the movie never glorifies the revenge aspect either. Every step of the way is pointing out how what Caesar is doing is toxic, what Caesar is doing is hurting the other apes around him, what Caesar is doing is putting himself exactly into where Koba is. He's feeding his own darkness, he's feeding his own anger, and it's not this thing of like, oh yeah, go get him, Caesar.
Yeah, and also, this movie really beats Caesar. Like, he is defeated in this movie. You see him lose 63 apes at the very beginning of the movie.
Yeah, that's the beginning.
Then he loses his wife and kid. Then he is beaten and starved and in a cage, just barely making it by.
Watching the fate of everybody that he is put into that situation. And separated from his remaining family, Cornelius.
Right, and very lightly paralleling the first film, but in a much different way.
Right, and what I think a lot of people might see as a big weakness in this film is how much of the film is really, really on the nose. It's like all the biblical imagery, all the World War II imagery, all the Vietnam imagery, all of the, like, Moses in the desert imagery, you know, I mean, there was another one too. Oh, slavery is a big one that's paralleled a lot in this movie too. Not just American Confederation slavery, which is definitely in there, but also the whole scene where Caesar stands up for one of the apes being whipped. You know, it's very reminiscent of that story in the Bible with Moses, but the whole thing is, like, even in that situation, this cyclical nature of history hasn't stopped. So even though the ending seems kind of like, look, happy storybook ending, it's really overshadowed by, no, even in this extreme circumstance of almost no apes left alive, almost no humans left alive, almost no civilization left, it's still going to keep going and keep repeating with the original series. It's really, really heavy-handed. You know, there's a lot of Caesar is Jesus kind of stuff, but part of the reason why I think that's actually one of the film's biggest strengths is the whole underlying theme of this film in particular is about the cyclical nature of history. You know, Colonel McCullough is saying, oh, you know, people who think naively that things can just be fixed haven't paid attention to history. And this moment in the franchise is a conglomeration of everything in humanity's history, but also to the point of showing that just because it happened before doesn't mean it doesn't happen again. And that is such a thing that we're struggling with right now, especially from an American perspective. Like, one of the things is we're pretty much starting our third wave of McCarthyism in 100 years. You know, just because, like, oh, we look back at the last Red Scare and we see clearly now that that was stupid and that was wrong and that hurt a lot of people and all that stuff. That doesn't stop us from doing it again right now. At all. You know, the whole thing of, in the movie, they want to build a wall which of course is going to be very reminiscent of Trump's wall, but that's also reminiscent of a lot of walls built in the past.
Right.
It's really proving that, like, oh, just because we know internment camps are bad, or we know that concentration camps are bad, just because we know that war is bad, just because we know that, like, when you have a Christian character take his enemy and put him up essentially on, like, a big crucifix, but that's really to the point of proving that that's how history goes. We know these things and we do it again anyway. There's no, like, real happy ending. There's no overcoming this stuff.
Yeah, sorry about the background noise. We have a garbage truck going on right now.
Yeah. And it's really interesting, too, especially with the idea of the ending where, there's the blank slate, so to speak, with the avalanche and everything, and, they journey through the desert, and Caesar's Moses. He's freed his people and brought them to the promised land and its home.
Also, the apes don't get their satisfaction of getting revenge on the humans because as soon as they escape, other humans come in and there's this whole conflict that they have. Mm-hmm. And then a giant avalanche comes and kills them all.
Yeah, and I really like the avalanche too, because as much as that seems very Deus Ex Machina, it's not just like, oh, and all of a sudden there was also an avalanche. The whole thing is they blew up the base, which is exactly like almost everybody's intention in that situation, but then there was the unforeseen natural consequence of the avalanche.
Yeah, symbolically, there's so much going for this film, and we're definitely going to podcast about this probably
a few different times.
Yeah, because there's a lot to crack open about this. I even want to probably do a video essay on this as well.
Oh,
I'm just like, not only is it a good movie, and everybody's like, oh, the quality of the movie and all that kind of stuff. Like you said, the message is so relevant yet so timeless. Mm-hmm. This movie is delivering on all angles. You have tremendous acting, including the humans, which has been a weakness of some of the other films.
Yeah, all the humans are the best cast that they've done so far in the entire franchise, easily.
Then you have the motion capture performance, which is absolutely top-notch.
Better than the last two movies.
Yeah.
Definitely, 100%.
And the rendering is practically photorealistic in this movie, which we were talking about with the last film. Like, there are photorealistic parts, but, like, it's just absolutely stunning with this film. Also, I have to say that Michael Giacchino stepped up his game even more than he did with the last film as well, because this score is absolutely amazing. Like, I'm going to be bummed if this doesn't get nominated for score this year. I'm going to get bummed if it doesn't get nominated for a bunch of stuff this year.
I'm really thinking that with the fact that the Oscars are becoming more nerd film friendly, that this could get a nomination for Best Picture.
I hope so.
It definitely needs to get Best Effects. It definitely needs to get Best Score, although almost every single year I disagree with them about score. Almost every single year. Just with the nominations. I think production design, 100%. Like, really, production design really, really, really needs... I mean, all of the films did, especially Dawn, but especially this one. Oh, my God. This would be the right year to give Andy Serkis his, Lifetime Achievement Award, for sure. Definitely. If people are looking at Hugh Jackman for Logan, which I'm not saying he doesn't deserve, he totally does, but I'm just saying... If that's even in the realm of possibility, Andy Serkis needs one. Oh my God.
Yeah, I was talking with somebody yesterday about opening the door for voice acting and motion capture performances. Because, okay, if you can't make motion capture its own category, like maybe throw in voice acting so that it's kind of a collection of voice acting and motion capture performance, or kind of like they do with comedy and musicals, because not every year we have a musical.
Yeah. The other thing that really worked in this movie was just, it really reached the emotional highs and lows and really went back and forth on that. Really, really well. Where this movie wasn't afraid to have some funny moments in the movie, but the comic relief elements always worked really well because they fit in with the nature of the character and the nature of the storyline at that moment. Nothing really felt forced or trying too hard.
Yeah, and I was a little worried about Bad Ape when he popped up, but he totally is the comic relief, but not in this weird forced way or anything like that.
Right. His character makes total sense, and he's funny, but not because he's trying to be funny.
Yeah.
And fun fact, he's Wayne from Saving Silverman. Like, what the fuck? I would never expect that guy to be in a Planet of the Apes movie. But he killed it. He did a great job. He was really, really fantastic.
And I will say the movie almost needs that character, because given how devastating this movie is throughout, like, this movie hits you at the beginning, hits you in the second act, and then just continues to beat you throughout, and you just need that break.
No, it doesn't, because the film just really elicits so many emotions throughout the movie. It's not just like watching Passion of the Christ, even though a couple scenes kind of feel like that, but it's only a couple moments of the movie.
Well,
and it's not just like 3 hours of it, you know?
I will say that out of all the movies that try to throw in Jesus imagery, this is by far one of the best.
Well, it's because it's Jesus imagery, but it's a combination with a lot of other things, and it's also because crucifixion is not just, oh, that happened to Jesus one time. That is a very real part of our history throughout many different cultures.
Right, I mean, there's elements of Spartacus in this as well. So, yeah, if your gut instinct is to immediately just draw Jesus parallels, especially with this story about, like, slaves uprising and all that kind of stuff, you gotta think about Spartacus as well.
Mm-hmm. But that's why I think it is important for a lot of these visuals to be as on the nose as they are. Because it really needs to get across that philosophical message in a very simple, easy to understand way that's not going to lead to actors just giving each other really long, obnoxious speeches.
Yeah, and I was really thankful that the scenes of exposition never felt forced. The scenes where people are talking about things that happened in the past never felt like we needed to see those scenes or anything like that. Like when Woody Harrelson talks about having to kill his son because of what he became, you can feel his pain. You can also see that he's gone crazy, but he sells it.
He really sells it, and it's not just him. A few of the apes have done that throughout the movie as well, but a big part of it is the actors really stepped up. But the other part of it, too, is just that it doesn't feel awkward, it doesn't feel too wordy, it doesn't feel, like, too unnatural. It just seems like how people talk.
I will say that, like, at the beginning, I was a little scared because the apes were speaking so much English that I was
but
just...
But not very many apes were speaking that much English.
Right, but, you know, once, like, Caesar was, you know, giving whole sentences and stuff, I was... Part of me was like, but the movie totally sells me on it. And I was aware that that was going to be the progression as the films went on. I just didn't want it to feel unnatural. And it doesn't feel unnatural in this film because many of them are still using the sign language. Many of them are communicating in other ways as well.
And also, a big part of the reason why it doesn't feel that unnatural is because there are so many situations in the movie where communication is still either a big issue or it's impossible.
Yeah.
Which kind of prevents it from seeming too easy. Like, oh, well, we'll just make everybody talk because that's the only way we can write a script.
But also, like, there's certain situations where signing actually helps them to hide from the guards, you know, that they can actually communicate. And that was kind of the same way in Rise, which, you know, drawing parallels once again.
But it's like when you have a situation where you have Maurice, who signs and doesn't speak English. I mean, not very much. You have Bad Ape, who speaks some English but doesn't sign at all. And then you have Nova, who can't, at that point in the story, can't communicate, period, in any way, shape, or form. And the three of them are alone working together. It gets to the point where it's like, no, this just feels normal. It doesn't really seem that weird that, like, Caesar can speak English and other people can't.
Yeah. So, yeah, we absolutely love this movie. If I didn't encourage you enough to see this movie, yeah, see this movie, see it multiple times if you like it, and tell your friends about it, because honestly, I would much rather see movies to this caliber and to Logan's caliber than these mindless superhero movies, which is not to say that superhero movies can't be mindless. I don't like these strict audience-pleasing movies.
Well,
There's a way to please the audience without just pandering to them. And this movie doesn't pander to its audience. It entertains, but it doesn't pander.
Yeah, and also, it was really cool. We saw it with a really great audience. I was really happy, it's probably not the best way to put it, but I was glad with the audience. When Caesar's family is killed, everyone was shocked. It was just like the communal, no! Like, you could actually almost hear some people who were like, no, what? No, ma'am. Not really, but, people were, laughing at certain parts, but people were, like, getting up, applauding, cheering, crying. It was, like, this clearly reached a huge, expansive audience.
I just hope it makes the box office.
Me too. It needs to. Like, this is one of the most deserving movies.
Yeah, and while we're actually releasing this during...
pre-screens, the movie hasn't been released yet.
Yeah, so our take on it has no influence by anybody whatsoever. So, yeah, it will be really interesting as time goes on and when we actually release this to see what other people's take on this film is.
Yeah. I think this movie has a really good chance of going over well, partly because I haven't looked at, like, box office of previous reboot Planet of the Apes, but...
they've increased each one.
Yeah, but the Mad Max Fury Road was Warner Brothers' second highest grossing film that year.
And I think China can play this movie, so that might give it a lot of money.
Well, it's not just China, it's a lot of other countries too, but yeah, for sure.
Well, that's what hurt Mad Max. That's what I'm...
No, that's a good point,
yeah.
For sure.
So I got a feeling that worldwide, this might be the most successful movie this year.
That would be awesome. That would be so awesome.
I would love that just because of the quality of this movie.
Mm-hmm.
Granted, I think it will probably be Spider-Man this year just because of, his character and Marvel and all that kind of stuff. But if this movie becomes the most successful movie of the year, I'm going to be really happy. I also, personally, while this is my favorite trilogy now, I wouldn't mind if it went past a little bit. I wouldn't mind if you made this 5 films.
You keep saying that, but one of the things about this is that I'm a really big proponent of when you have everything perfectly set up, perfectly accomplished, it fits the narrative of its own film, it fits in the narrative of the prequels, it fits in with the narrative of the sequels, the original series, and it's a great conclusion all by itself. Once you've gotten there, maybe don't touch it anymore. It's good. Just stop. I kind of have that with Buffy. It's like Buffy ended,
Well,
this
I
movie
think you
had a clear ending, and it was a really damn good ending.
I think you could possibly pick this up and make it about the humans, so that this is the first movie in that trilogy. So it's still 5 movies, like I would like, but have it be about the downfall of humanity, and then bookend it with the Icarus falling to Earth.
Yeah.
That's just me, though.
Okay.
Well, thanks for listening.